I got about 30 of my colleagues who all locumed across Victoria, independent of agencies. And that was the snowball that is now StatDoctor. They're threatening to bring legal action against us unless. The main reason we're still profitable is.
Welcome to episode 25 of the Clinician Founder Podcast, where we explore how clinicians are building expert-led, mission-driven ventures that are reshaping healthcare from the inside out. I'm your host, Dr. Shubhendu Kulshreshtha, an executive coach and emergency physicians, helping clinicians become founders so that they can make medicine their side hustle. Today's guest is Dr. Anurag Gangupati, or Anu as he likes to be called, frontline emergency physician like myself, but also the founder of StatDoctor, which is a platform putting doctors and hospitals back in control of locum work. Think about transparent rates, no lock-ins, no hidden fees, seamless onboarding, and faster shift fills. In this conversation, we'll dig into how Anu spotted the system-level problem and turned it into a scalable solution, what it takes to build a tech platform while working clinically, the business model behind StatDoctor, and he's promised me that he's quite transparent and we can ask him anything we like. And we're going to briefly touch on why Australia's clinician-led innovation scene is one to really watch out for. If you've ever looked at a broken workflow and thought there's got to be a better way, then this episode is your blueprint. Clarity, tactics, momentum from someone who's built it in the real world. Oh, and if you haven't already, follow the Clinician Founder Podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, YouTube, wherever you like to listen, really. Hit subscribe and don't miss a moment. Let's get into it. Thanks so much for joining me today, Anu. How are you?
I'm good, thanks, Shub. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's so fantastic to have these conversations, and I'm really excited for this one especially. I guess for our listeners, could you give us an overview of both who you are and what StatDoctor is to start off with?
Yeah, so I'm a New Zealand trained doctor who came over to Australia in 2020. I had this vision of becoming an ED consultant, but after 1 year of working as a second year doctor, got super burnt out. Thought about leaving clinical practice, but instead kind of turned my hand towards locum work and travel. And then over the next kind of 4 or 5 years, basically have made locum work my life. So mainly working in rural and remote communities, mainly in emergency departments, found my love and passion for medicine again, but then found the workflows and structures that surrounded locum work in Australia very redundant, bureaucratic, and expensive. And so built StatDoctor as a solution out of my own pain to try and improve those workflows, help doctors find shifts easier, faster without the bureaucracy and middlemen of agencies, but also help the healthcare sector, which is in Australia is spending $1.5 billion a year on agency fees that I believe weren't providing much value to these healthcare facilities and trying to provide a faster, technologically enabled way to manage shifts.
Amazing. So I'm hearing in there that you identified a pain point. You saw that there was potential in that being a feasible business, but talk to me a bit more about the person behind the business. Who is Anu that had the audacity to actually get going and get started and make this come to life?
I've always been someone who has found problems and tried to find solutions. I had a tutoring company in medical school that really felt as though health education wasn't being brought very well to the students. And so that was quite successful. And then I also tried to develop my own medtech product in my final year of med school, which was a defibrillator that was charged by a cell phone. And the aim was I had seen cardiac arrests in the community and knew that AEDs were so expensive and life-saving. And so I teamed up with an engineering friend of mine and we validated the way of a iPhone 11 at the time battery charging the pads and having pads kind of sitting in your first aid kit, if you will, trying to reduce the expense. And we took that to a patent pending, and then another company came and built a much better device than we were looking at a cheaper cost. But it was an amazing learning for me. And so I've always kind of tinkered with entrepreneurship and always wanted to do something and solve real world problems. And particularly with a doctor background, it's always the aim has been in healthcare. I love healthcare, finding problems, and there's so many to try and fix. If I had many lives, I would try and solve them all.
So clearly this wasn't your first rodeo. You'd done this before, and as with a lot of these things, you have multiple attempts at trying to solve something, lots of failure, but each of those failures teaches you so much. And so, I'm imagining that period when you've come to Australia, you've seen what the locums market is like, and you're thinking to yourself, there's got to be a better way. What were some of the things that made you say, actually, of all of the problems I can solve, this one is really worth solving?
I think purely the size of the problem really hit me hard. I spent at least a year and a half experiencing the problem before trying to find a solution. And that was purely because it's very easy to just feel like the legacy systems that are in place are the only way it can be. But after feeling so much stress, and then at one point being threatened with legal action by one of the locum agencies that was working with me, and I can go into that story.
Oh yeah, tell us more.
Later on. I basically felt as though this is just a ridiculous concept, and if I don't try and solve this now, no one will. And I was able to actually lean on some of the concepts that came out of the UK with locum banks and a few of the other startups that had started in 2018 to see that this was a valid concept in other countries, and tried to adapt that to Australia, which is a lot more fragmented. The NHS has a nice coverage over hospitals, so trying to team them together, or health networks or health services a lot easier. Australia, every hospital essentially is a siloed company. And so trying to bridge the gaps and find workflow solutions across them all is a lot more difficult. But that's what we're trying to solve with StatDoctor.
Very interesting. I mean, I already feel like even though the NHS is supposedly one system, every hospital and every organization is kind of got its own protocols and policies. And if that's feels so fragmented, I can't even imagine what it might be like in Australia. So where did that take you? So you identified the problem. You said, okay, there's a huge scale of the problem. Where did you go from there?
The next step, I think, was in validating the problem and validating that it wasn't just me who felt the problem. So I reached out to a few social media networks, a few of my other colleagues who had locumed, and tried to establish whether the problems that I was facing with my locum agency, but also with the locum system in general, were across the board. And I was able to find that quite easily. And then one of the best decisions I ever made was I also looked at the other side of the marketplace that we built. And I went to healthcare facilities, to admin staff, to director of medical services of these hospitals to see what their points were, because I knew that solving just one side of what we were trying to build was a two-sided marketplace was not the most efficient way. And I think a lot of marketplace founders struggle with that. But realistically, you're trying to run two businesses at once. So you need to validate two ideas, build two solutions, and then merge them together, two waitlists even, and then merge them together. So we took our assumptions that the problem was all in pricing about locum agencies to healthcare facilities. And we found that pricing wasn't actually the biggest concern. It was more around security and safety of the doctors that they were hiring. They were happy to pay top dollar as long as they were convinced that the credentialing and the security was the best. So then the question became, how do we meet or better locum agency credentialing? But also, what added value can we provide these hospitals? And so we looked at not just doing an onboarding process and verification of documents, which is kind of the baseline or standard, but also could we get hospitals to review doctors? Could we have some testimonials? Could we try and do like an Uber style accountability model? So doctors who are working through our platform regularly could get feedback on their shifts, but also go into shifts knowing that they would have a rating coming. So they put more effort and accountability and try harder, because it's not uncommon for those who can't get into training programs or those who fall off kind of their path in medicine to take up locum work, and you can get paid very well. And if you're only doing 1 or 2 weeks at a hospital and then you're never going back there, to have low accountability. I know one of I'm going to call him a colleague, I wouldn't call him a friend, acquaintance maybe, intentionally worked weekends and would tell all the people who came to the come back on Monday when the regular doctor was there. And realistically, they're being paid $2,000, $3,000 a shift to then just not really do much work. And hospitals would complain, but that doctor would then just get kicked to the next hospital because the agency wouldn't pass the feedback on to any other hospital because they're still trying to make money off the doctor.
Wow. So it sounds like you really dove into exploring what the problem was, and it wasn't just about the pricing, which it can appear to be on a superficial level, but it sounds like you found a bit of an unfair advantage when it comes to this marketplace and serving both sides of it. Is that where you're positioned at the moment?
Yeah, I think so. I think if you're trying to build a product that moves someone from the legacy system they're already using to a new technology, you have to provide more than just one avenue of value. So if you just undercut the traditional option, even if it's by 10 or 15%, that's not enough value for people to take the time, effort, training to change. So what more can we do for them? So we have reviews and testimonials. We allow locums who have worked in the hospital through our platform to then sign on full time without paying like a buyout clause or a temp to perm clause against us. So we're also fixing permanent recruitment for these hospitals. So
Wow.
we're now providing almost 3 cherries to one hospital. It's a no brainer for them to sign on. We're trying to make that decision guaranteed.
Yeah. And talk to us a bit about what that means for you and StatDoctor as a business, because a huge conversation I have with people, and I think a lot of doctors fall into this camp that we want to do a lot of things from the goodness of our heart, and that often means making it super cheap and really affordable and accessible to everybody. However, the pricing is a really tricky psychological game as well. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so we have kind of 2 pricing models. We run a similar to a locum agency type cost per shift model where hospitals pay us a flat rate of $99 per shift to staff a doctor, which is still 50% reduced of what a traditional agency would charge. And the reason they pay less is the contract signing and negotiations occurred between the doctor and the hospital. So the healthcare facility does have to put a little bit more time and energy into finding and selecting the right doctor. But the 50% discount we think is valuable. And then our aim really is to move to a SaaS model. So we bring hospitals onto a subscription type model, and dependent on the hospital size and their locum agency spend, that might be anywhere from $10,000 a year to $100,000 a year. And we look at how much they're spending and how many doctors we have on the platform and the realistic chance of how many shifts we're going to be able to fill, and try and find a subscription that works for them. That's still discounted. It gives us front-end revenue that we can then spend to bring more doctors on to increase the value add to these hospitals.
Wow. And I'm assuming it's free on the doctor's end to work with yourself.
Yes, very much. So that's one side of the marketplace. And again, like I said, you've got running 2 businesses. So the question then becomes, what is the 3 value adds or cherries we can bring to the doctor side? So the cost is we have to make it free because going through an agency is free. So there's no ability to take, no doctors would sign on. So I guess our value adds, one, it's technologically based. So you don't have to talk to humans. You don't have to be called by recruiters. You don't have to check your emails. The app functions and notifies you of the shifts that you want it to. If you go on holiday, you turn your notifications off. You don't get pestered. You come back, you're searching for work. You can turn it back on. So that's kind of our first and I guess main value add. The second one is the direct to hospital signing. So by doing that and the reduced costs that we charge hospitals, on average, shifts on our platform are slightly at a higher rate. We get crisis rates slightly before they would go to an agency. And we have some partner hospitals that only use us instead of going through any recruitment agencies for posting. So we have that extra value add to some of the doctors as well. And then some of the next value adds we're bringing in our version 2 build that started about 2 weeks ago is the ability for same day pay. So you'll be able to be paid before the hospital is ready to pay you. And then we've teamed up with a debt financing platform who will then go chase the money that you're owed, but you get paid straight away, which is another huge issue for locums because hospitals can, like I did a locum in Queensland Health a month ago and still haven't been paid. And so, who knows when I will be paid. I'm just sitting waiting. So that's kind of value adds that we're looking to add in.
Oh, brilliant. So again, it's not just about the money or the rates. I mean, you are giving them the best rates, but it's beyond that, like really getting to what the nitty gritty of the problem is. One of the things, if I zoom out a little bit, is, when you talk about the Uber style, the ratings, the creating of transparency from one side to the other, there's obvious advantages to that sort of a business. At the same time, there's many reasons why that transparency hasn't existed until now. And it's largely the acceptance of that transparency on both sides of it. How have you managed to tackle that?
Yeah, we know that some doctors don't like to be rated and you can be unfairly rated by hospitals. We do the same rating system back to the hospital and healthcare facility. So we know that some hospitals skimp on accommodation. They don't pay proper travel costs. They have terrible onboarding. You're sick of that. So it works both ways. We are finding as we're rolling out that feature that the doctors who maybe are not the type of doctors we want on the platform aren't using us as much. And we're okay with that. We want to be a service that's providing high quality, and we want to be able to give hospitals that transparency like you would if you're booking an Uber. You want someone who's 4.7 stars or higher rated, let's say. They also want a doctor who's been rated by, 4 other hospitals as 4.5 or stars. And most people are very generous. Like,
Yeah.
no one is really going to give it 1 star unless you do something ridiculously bad. But just like Uber, we'll have the ability to dispute ratings, to talk to us. We will then do some dispute resolution, talk to the healthcare facility, try and get honest reviews. But the aim is just to try and provide some accountability on both sides.
Yeah, fantastic. It's reminding me of this idea I've had for a long time now, that I think a similar platform's needed for the renting that happens in the UK, like tenants and landlords. Just
Same in
transparency.
Australia. Yes.
It's like, whoever's listening to this, if you've got headspace, go on Lovable, create a platform, just get started.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. Awesome. So it sounds like you are charging the hospitals less, you're giving the doctors the best platform, and you're solving some hidden problems that you've taken the time to explore. And if I get this right, you're still profitable because you don't do the HRE management onboarding stuff that hospitals themselves take care of. Is that right?
Yeah, the main reason we're still profitable is, one, we don't pay tax, payroll tax or workers' compensation insurance on the doctors on our platform because they're not employees of us. So a locum agency, they're employees of the agency and get sublet out to the hospital. We're not a recruitment platform or agency. We're just a software. So we're tech. We're like a Seek that's specific to doctors. And so doing that, we almost eliminate 50% of the cost that an agency would be paying. And then the second part is, because we're fully technological and the team is just me, my co-founder, and a CTO, we don't do any of the humanoid actions that agencies have to do. Some of the largest agencies in Australia have 200, 300 employees. And the job of those employees is to call every hospital, find what vacant shifts there, then call the doctor, try and convince them to take the shift, and call the hospital, say, this shift has now got this doctor approved. The hospital then says yes, and then they call the doctor and say, yo, you've been approved. So we put the power on the hospital. The hospitals advertise the shifts as they want, and then the doctors click yes and apply, and the hospitals get all their documents and can make the decision of to hire or not.
That's beautiful. I mean, I've been in that situation where the agency's told me I've got a shift shown up, and everyone looks at me being like, why are you here today? We don't need you. And I've just driven 3 or 4 hours to do the shift and come back, and still haven't been paid, by the way, many months later for all of that time that I spent. Ridiculous. So this is fantastic to hear. And in a way, it kind of means that you're not really a locum agency. You're not replacing that market. You are providing a new service that tackles the same problem.
Definitely. And we've had a lot of flack from agencies, but we are really not trying to replace them. We do think there is a role for agencies for more bespoke, specialized recruitment, but there should be a middle ground between a hospital using its own network of doctors and having to go out and find a specific doctor. And that's where we're trying to form our niche. Yeah. And 1.5 billion a year on agency fees is just too much and too ridiculous. And so even if we can take 1% of that and reduce it, that's a huge value add to the healthcare sector.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And thank you for kind of sharing that with us. I think it puts things into perspective and really hopefully is inspiring people to help them think about like, oh, I've got a problem, got to validate it, really dig into the solution, find what else is there beyond just the money. I think one of the other aspects that comes up, especially with doctors, is the risk of whatever we're doing. And I'm keen to kind of get into that story about you being challenged legally, but also what I'm assuming, since they're not your employees, you don't have to be indemnified. You don't have to worry about their malpractice and other things. Is that true?
Yeah, so all locum doctors in Australia have to have their own medical indemnity insurance. So they get covered by the public hospital sector. But if you are locuming, you're locuming through an ABN as a sole trader business. And so to do that, you have to have your own medical indemnity. And that's one of the documents you have to have on StatDoctor before you can start applying for shifts. So no agency does that either. So they're not involved in the medical malpractice side of things. Legal threat that I had back in 2021 was actually for a breach of locum agency contract. So I signed on with an agency as most people do, didn't really read the contract, was just really excited to start locuming, and they were one of the largest agencies in Australia, had heaps of shifts available. They placed me out in a rural Australian town. I worked for 2 weeks night shifts, which as an ED HMO, which is my favorite thing to do. I really liked the town, really liked the hospital, loved the staff. And so I went to the HR person at the end of my 2 weeks and I said, hey, look, I really love working here. Do you have any kind of 2-month, 3-month stint? I'll take all of them and I'll stay. And she said, oh, look, we're actually well staffed. We don't need you. I said, okay, that's fine. So for 7 months, I continued to travel with this locum agency, found shifts all around Australia. The hospital then called me up directly and said, hey, look, we actually have a 3-month stint. We cannot find any doctors. Will you come and work? And I said, oh, look, I actually want to come for 6 months now. Because if I'm going to come and going to move to Portland, I'm going to relocate fully. But I want a higher rate. I want travel and accommodation paid for because you're not going to have to pay an agency. So I signed a contract directly with the hospital. The agency found out 3 weeks later because they were calling up and getting the rosters from the hospital to see that I had signed on. And what I didn't realize is in the fine print of my locum agency contract was what's called a lock-in contract or buyout clause. So for 12 months after an agency places you at any hospital, you cannot sign a contract directly with the hospital.
12 months?
12 months. Yeah.
Wow.
So without the agency taking a cut. So at the three weeks in I'd done this, I'd got maybe $20 an hour more per hour. So it was really good extra rate and everything that I'd negotiated. The agency sent me an email saying, look, you've breached your contract. You need to keep including us in all your invoices to the hospital. I just ignored it. Then a week later, they sent another one. I just ignored it. And then a week later, the hospital HR person called me in after my night shift. So it's 8:30 in the morning. I'm exhausted after a night shift. And she goes, hey, look, the locum agency's found out you're working. They're actually told us that you're in breach of your contract. They're threatening to bring legal action against us unless we include them in your invoices. And since we are now giving them, it was 22.5% was the commission at that time, we can't give you the extra $20 an hour that we had guaranteed. We can't continue to fund your accommodation as well as we had. We're not going to give you the provisions of, no, they kept the provisions. I think they've traveled to and from Melbourne. But I lost a lot. And there was no way for me to get out of it. The other option was the hospital had to pay $35,000 to buy me out of that contract. So there were their two options.
Wow. Okay.
I just felt so trapped. And locuming is meant to be freeing, and you're exploring your flexibility and travel and living your best life. And there's no moment that I felt less like that than at that time. And at the agency that had been my closest ally and really good friend just left me high and dry. They never really contacted me after that, but continued to take 22.5%, not from my contract, but a commission on top of what I was charging to the hospital for the next 6 months. And it was just ridiculous. So that was kind of the fire that built in me saying, so from then on, I've never used a locum agency since. So I initially started locuming direct with hospitals. I'd call them up and be like, hey, I'm a locum, I'm an independent, I don't use an agency, here's all my documents and references.
Yep.
They were all like, oh, this is weird, why are you doing that? But then as COVID hit and costs and budgets, they realized, hold on, we're not paying 22.5%. Then they started calling me directly and I got preference for all the shifts in 2022. Wow. There wasn't a single shift that I didn't want, that I didn't get. And a lot of my friends started seeing me doing this. And so I got about 30 of my colleagues who all locumed across Victoria, independent of agencies. And that was kind of the snowball that is now StatDoctor, where I just put some technology in between.
Oh, brilliant. That is so good. Good on you for breaking out and taking people with you. Could you share a little bit more about the challenges around getting your first clients? It sounds like you had a group of people with you who were facing the problem, who were on that burning platform ready to do something different. Was it still difficult? And I'm assuming the answer is yes, but how difficult was it?
Extremely difficult. I think the difference between a pilot and a trial and getting someone to pay you is really hard. Offering a service for a cost per shift model that's very similar to an agency, we then had to move and sell ourselves like an agency to these healthcare facilities, but also explain a point of difference. And then the procurement process and the number of stakeholders in healthcare facilities means that it's just a really slow process. So we were talking to people in November of last year who have just signed and put their first shift on a month ago. And that's just purely because the HR has to approve, then the medical director has to approve, then the CEO has to approve, then the CFO has to approve, and some of them go to state government to approve. So it's just such a slow, burdensome process. One of them we had to put together like a business proposal for to compare us to their traditional locum agency spend. And so selling into healthcare is really hard. And that's why legacy systems that are really bad in any aspect of healthcare just stay for so long because adoption is just so slow, particularly in the public sector. Privately, we've done really well. We have 30 healthcare facilities, 11 are private hospitals. And because they just have no bureaucracy, they just think of that they are actually quite keen on cost. And they're like, oh, you're 50% cheaper. Yeah, next. One of them next day started posting shifts. So it's a very different option. I know you guys don't have that necessarily in the UK, but in Australia especially, the mixed private public system is, again, two very different sectors to sell to.
That's amazing. I mean, I know that there are private hospitals, not that many, but there's a growing number of private hospitals in the UK. And I know that they do need RMOs, and there's some companies that do hire RMOs, but I've never actually managed to come across locum agencies feeding into private sector. Once again, a business idea for anyone listening.
That's definitely where a lot of our value add is. A lot of the hospitals that only recruit through us now are private. And because they're private, they have very good compensation. They have great terms. They're great to work with. It's not that difficult work. It's not very busy. And so most of the clinical work I do now is mainly in private emergency departments in metro centers where I work a night shift and see between, I don't know, 5 or 6 patients on a night. They're privatized patients.
Wow.
We pretty much do pathology and radiology on all of them, regardless of what they've come in for. And we admit 90% of them because there's beds on the ward. So it's a pretty, and the clinicians love it. The specialists all get paid based on the number of people under their care. So there's never a battle in the morning to call the cardiologist and say, hey, this lady has angina. He's like, okay, that's fine. I'll do an echo this morning.
Oh, brilliant. That's so cool. So I've completely forgotten my question here. Anyways, the joys of being live, sometimes that happens. So you've had this challenge, you've then created StatDoctor. What in your mind are some of the key milestones when you look back now over the last 3 or 4 years?
I think the first is taking the leap. Like I said, for a year and a half, I faced the problem. I didn't think that I was the right person to do it. And particularly when you're working as a doctor or any clinician, you got enough on. I was working 70, 80 hours a week, full time as a locum. And to then try and add more workload to that is a really daunting task. So I think the first milestone I look at is the first step. The second milestone is in October of this year, I left full-time work to go almost full-time into my business. I still locum a day a week maybe. And that was a huge step, particularly because I got a lot of, I'm going to say hate from my consultants. Particularly, I was surge regging at the time. And my consultant surgeon was like, what are you doing with your life? You're going to regret this. You can't become a surgeon if you take time off. What is your CV going to look like? Like entrepreneurship is not going to look good for surgical interviews. And it really puts a lot of doubt in your mind as like at the time I was I still want to do surgery at some point, but realizing entrepreneurship and innovation is part of the medical process. And you can use the skills and knowledge that you have from your medical degree, and it's not wasted if you build a business. Even if it's not in healthcare, like you don't look at someone who's got an engineering or a law degree who builds a successful business as an unsuccessful person. But for some reason, we look at doctors who do that as, oh my gosh, you did a medical degree and then started a laundromat? What are you doing? But like, I think any entrepreneurship journey, if you have some knowledge behind you, the empathy and compassion you build as a clinician, the problem solving ability is all super valuable for any career path you take.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, even in the UK, like formal training programs have entrepreneurial or innovation, or I mean, research has always been there, but all of these allied non-clinical things built into the training program. You can do fellowships in those spaces as well. And yet the perspective of the average doctor still remains, you're wasting your life, you're wasting your time. Why are you doing it that way? So it just speaks to so much about like the limitations we have in our own minds of what the role of a doctor is and what you can or cannot do. And honestly, that's kind of the advantage you have if you are thinking the way we are thinking and entrepreneurially clinician founders are thinking, then you're one of the very few, and that's your way to get ahead from everybody else.
Yeah, definitely. And I think there is a huge change. Like even in the last year, the number of clinicians that are more entrepreneurial in their thinking and willing to take a sidestep. And even if you go to medical schools now, I was doing some presentations at Melbourne Uni here. You know, so many of the med students are so interested. Half of them have startups themselves. They're
Wow.
doing AI coding. And it's just amazing that people are just so interested in solving problems. And with how far technology has come now, you can do it from your bedroom. So you
Yeah.
don't need a huge team behind you. You don't need a developer. You don't need anything really. You can do it yourself.
Yeah, it's honestly a huge revolution, and there's leaders and there's laggers, and we have a choice today to decide which side we go to. I remembered my question, so I'm going to ask you very quickly. When it comes to kind of getting started with your own business and getting people to invest in your idea, could you talk to us about what trust means? Because yes, there's a transaction, but there's this very human element of people actually believing in you and trusting you. How has your journey been on that front?
I think another real value add of being a clinical entrepreneur is you automatically start with a trust level. By being a clinician and a doctor with letters in front of you, people
Mm,
automatically assume that you're smart, hardworking, and care. You already have those three boxes ticked, which is three really key elements for any founder. You
mm,
start almost on level one as opposed to level zero. And so I really encourage clinicians to keep using that title that they have accumulated to as a starting point and sticking point and building point for sharing their story. So I know quite successful doctors who have built companies and they no longer practice clinically and they probably haven't practiced for 20, 30 years, but they always introduce themselves as doctors, as nurses, as the first, because you get that first step. And
mm.
I think we're very fortunate in this career to have that as a baseline. The second thing is, I think you get better at sharing your story the longer you do it. I look back at how I tried to sell and talk about StatDoctor in the first instance versus how I do now. And a lot of it is around storytelling. It's not about, this is what I'm building, this is the problem I'm solving. It's more about the journey. People love to hear a story. If you have a personal reason for doing it, people love to hear that. Like I talk all about my personal issues with agencies, with healthcare, and trying to share that with people so that they know you're in it for the long haul. Because if you have this inner desire and passion, then investing money, investing time, investing resources into you is easy because they know for the next 5, 10 years, I'm not going anywhere. This
Yeah,
is a fad.
this is true for you. Do you have any particularly favorite go-to frameworks for storytelling?
Not really. I have started doing a bit of social media work outside. I do a lot of LinkedIn, but trying to get onto Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and working through storytelling on that aspect. And I know that
Okay.
there are frameworks that people use, and
Mm,
it's mainly around like hooks and things to try to engage people.
yeah.
But I don't think there is any exact story framework that works well. But I think if you can be vulnerable and empathetic, which all clinicians are as a baseline,
Yeah.
then the average person, average investor, average everything will love you.
Absolutely. I think, especially as doctors, we come across stories on a daily basis. Like every patient, every history is a story. I've got a few, if you wouldn't mind me sharing.
Please, yeah.
One is a post-it note here, but the quickest one that I really like is the three C's. So context, character, context, conclusion. And I like sharing this with people who, when you're handing over patients, in the morning after your 8 a.m. shift, and you really want the other person to listen to you and remember what you're telling them. You describe what the character is like, what were they up to, what is the context around what happened, and then the conflict is within the context, and the conclusion of why they're here.
I
What's the
really
what's
like
the
that.
end of the story?
Three
Yeah.
C.
Three
I think
C's, yeah.
a lot of people who do storytelling do it for too long.
Mm,
You need to be able to get your point across in really 30 seconds if you're a founder. They say like a 30-second elevator pitch. You have 30
that's it.
seconds in an elevator. How can you sell your story?
Yeah.
So you need to be very crisp and clean. And The odd really large number also goes a long way, like 1.5 billion spent on agency fees. Everyone will listen.
Yeah.
Disrupting a big market. But it doesn't have to be cost. It can be, 5 million Americans are lonely. Like it just has to be a really large number and a really interesting fact, and people will listen.
Yeah. I think all under the context picture is like paint a picture, like get the other person to see, like who's the character Anu, what's the conflict and the context, like, being taken to court for breaching contract of like the most freeing time in your career turning into the most stressful time in your career. And what's the conclusion? He built StatDoctor. It's like, boom, story done.
Amazing.
It's as simple as that. I have another one.
Yes.
Which I can put in the comments later. It's got 6 steps to it.
Okay.
A few more details. Actually, let me just read it out. So step 1 is, who is it about? What's the character? Step 2 is, what do they want? Step 3 is, why can't they get it? Step 4 is, what do they do about it? Step 5 is, why doesn't that work? And step 6 is, how does it end? So you're constantly going through that loop of like ups and downs and challenges and like, building hope and then introducing a problem. And that's like a really engaging storytelling tactic. So I keep this handy because I'm not really good at storytelling and I've clearly spent a lot of time trying to get better at it. Yeah.
Those are great frameworks. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. How about we do a quick 3 or 4 questions of a rapid fire before I give you the mic and let you ask me a few questions?
Sure.
All right. Let me see. I've not done this before, so hopefully it'll be fun. Cool. First one is, what's the most underrated metric for marketplaces?
Engagement.
Okay. What's one feature that you killed that users still ask for?
Direct messaging.
Oh, interesting. What's one hill you'll die on about locum work?
Agencies suck.
With you there. What's one book, tool, or post you'd recommend to every clinician founder right now?
There's probably a lot. I don't have any on the top of my head. I think what I would say is engage on LinkedIn would be my tip.
Double down on that. I think it's been the most valuable use of my time, biggest leverage, LinkedIn beyond any other platform, really.
It's actually crazy and people undervalue and underrate it. And you don't realize that post that you made 8-9 months ago, even if they got no engagement, if they're about your startup or your journey, will pay fruitfully in years to come. Like investors, healthcare facilities, doctors all recognize me through LinkedIn content. And it's just a practice that you need to get into if you're going to build a business. There's no doubt.
Absolutely. It's free, takes a little bit of effort, but not even that much, really, to be honest. I think the biggest hurdle is getting over it, getting over yourself and just getting there. Awesome. Cool. So with that, I'll give you the mic and let you ask me whatever questions you've got. And I'm a bit worried because you said you've got some gnarly questions.
Look, I'm very passionate about clinical entrepreneurship, and I know that you are as well. I'm part of a not-for-profit here in Australia that tries to help clinicians take that first, second, or third step. In all your time of interviewing clinical founders, what have you found is the hardest part for clinicians about taking that step and the biggest weakness? I was saying that care, empathy, being a doctor is a strength. What is the biggest weakness for clinicians who try and start a business?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. And I tend to be a bit of a abstract thinker, so apologies if this goes all over the place. But I think speaking to everybody, two words are coming up. One is risk tolerance, and the other one is, I guess, self-perception, really. So one is that we manage risk on a daily basis in life or death situations, and we do that really well. But we do that trusting that what we've been taught, the frameworks we have, the evidence that we're exposed to is going to serve us well. We don't actually trust in ourselves. We trust in what we've been taught and what is given to us. And we're really good at absorbing all of that information and then applying it to these life or death situations and scenarios. We don't actually trust in ourselves to be able to do this. It's a weird kind of dichotomy because you are the person applying the guidelines. And after a point, you get confident in doing that. But I think we struggle with undefined risk. We struggle with risk that perhaps we shouldn't take in the first place. Like the best way to manage the risk is to not have it. So, when it comes to stepping outside of medicine, you're like, oh my God, there's all of this risk. Do I even need to take it? I think that's the biggest hurdle that really holds us back. It's our strength on the clinical side, but it really holds us back when we're being clinical. And the truth is, no one's going to die at the end of the day. So that's the easy bit. And I think that's why the word self-perception kind of came in, because It's really about how you see yourself. And I don't know about you, Anu, but I think most doctors that I speak to and most of the people that come into this world, especially as perhaps first generation doctors who don't come from a legacy of, that's the only thing you can do, is we've got this perception of like a bit of an idealistic world, and we kind of just want to put our head down and do good work and work hard. And we hope that that will make us successful and like, fulfill our ikigai and our purpose and, be a really good job, make a difference to humanity, and all of those things. And we kind of just want to not think about any of these other things, not put up with the challenges of what it means to run a business or actually lead a mission, so much so that we're willing to give these massive organizations, these hospitals, and the healthcare system so much of what our true value is really worth in exchange for a lower pay and just the convenience of showing up and doing our job. Yeah. I don't know what you think about that.
I couldn't agree more. I definitely think risk tolerance. I feel like medical school busts the riskness out of us, and we come out being scared of, because it is life and death. The third point I would add, if I was to add a third, would be perfectionism. Most clinicians are type A perfectionists, and startups fail. You have to be okay with being in the public and getting things wrong. And clinicians are scared or don't like doing that. And I didn't very much before starting, and it's just a great thing.
Yeah.
Okay, next question. I don't know how many questions I have, but I'm just going to go for it.
Yeah.
What is the biggest mistake you've made in starting your podcast?
Oh, okay. Interesting question. I mean, to be honest, I feel like this podcast was a pretty low risk, sort of low hanging fruit for me. But I suppose the biggest mistake I've made, which was also probably my biggest learning, was to start my other podcast, which was called Chai for Change. And it was about sitting down over chai and having conversations about change, because I love chai and I love change. And I was like, cool, super interesting. And, that podcast still exists. I think it's only got 3 or 4 episodes and some fantastic conversations on there. But the problem was it didn't fit into any of the rest of my business ecosystem. So, it meant an hour and a half long conversation, and I was still really new to podcasting and learning how to edit and post and promote the podcast and all of those things, which meant that I was putting my time and effort into something that did not give me any rewards. I mean, it gave me rewards in the sense of like, fine, it was an interesting thing to do, but was it valuable? Probably not. And I think doing that helped me realize that, it's important to be selective about where you put your time and effort, and think about what are the flywheels you're generating, because this podcast works because it's valuable for you as a guest to come on and talk about StatDoctor. It's valuable for the listeners to be inspired by your story, and it's valuable for me to be able to host this platform and people to get to know about me as well at the same time. So there's value generation there, and what the other podcast wasn't doing that for me. And I think it was just a matter of realizing that I'd spent hours and hours and hours doing this thing, which wasn't the best way or the best place to kind of get my rewards from. And now everywhere else that I kind of focus is like, how does this link into everything else really? Shiny objects, fine, but what do I say no to? We were talking about this earlier as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I really, really resonate with that. I think that when you become a founder, you start seeing problems everywhere and you want to solve problems everywhere, and you can't, unfortunately, solve them all. So you need to be very selective about what problems you're solving and how it adds to the personal mission, your personal brand, your business that you're building. So I really resonate with that. And I've definitely taken on my fair share of projects that don't comply or add to what I'm doing. And it's set me back, I think. So I get that. Okay, next question.
Go for it.
If you weren't a doctor, what would you have studied at university?
What would I have studied at university? This one's an easier question. So I'll tell you this. So I grew up wanting initially to be a fighter pilot. Yeah, I was fascinated by planes. My dad was an air traffic controller, and I said that's what I want to be. And then I had an uncle who was a fighter pilot, now a commercial pilot, and he said, well, you're going to kind of be studying for the rest of your life. It's not an easy job, and like is really demanding and physically and emotionally, and it takes a toll on your body and your family life, and et cetera, et cetera. So I said, yeah, okay, fine. And then I got glasses, and I was like, okay, cool. Kind of gave up on that dream. The other thing I really want.
You can't have glasses and be a fighter pilot. Is that what you're saying? You have to have perfect vision or something?
Yeah. Or like correctable vision or something. Yeah. Not glasses, because they'll fall off and then you'll be a liability. Fair enough. Right. The other thing I wanted to do was to become a chef. And I love cooking. I really enjoy cooking. And this is something that I still do, and I really would take it seriously. Except I had another uncle who's a chef. Yeah, I've got
Yeah.
a pretty interesting family. And so this.
Sorry, my cat is stuck. One sec.
Go for it. Oh, hi.
I didn't realize I'd locked him inside.
Oh, no. Very
He's
fluffy cat.
He's a rag doll. Sorry. Yes, you
Brilliant.
are.
Yeah.
So do you cook now?
Yeah, I am responsible for the food at home. So I cook. I love doing a barbecue. And I just enjoy food. I'm obsessed. But yeah, so I had another uncle who is a chef, and he said, well, if you become a chef, you're going to be working late nights. You're going to be working like on holidays, like, Christmas, New Year's, Diwali, whatever. When everyone else is on vacation, you're responsible for feeding them. And I said, fine, okay, cool. Like, let's think about it. And it was like, wow, look where I am now. I'm literally doing all of those things that they said don't do the job.
You didn't make a career. Let's stop that.
Exactly. And otherwise, I kind of come from a family of engineers. So like probably at 8-7 or something, I was doing QBasic and Logo and like some early programming. Never really kind of stuck with it. And come 10th grade, 12th grade, when you're thinking about where you go for uni, I was kind of like, I didn't know what to do. And I was just like, I want to do something with my hands. I want to be on the front line. I want to like build and do something creative, and I want to do what I'm good at, not just what I like. So, that kind of took me down this route of realizing that, hey, being a doctor isn't too bad. So that's how I ended up here. And one of the comparisons I constantly make is like me being a doctor versus me being a chef. I probably am on my feet just as much, working hard just as much. But as a doctor, I'm kind of bringing people from ill health to normalcy, or in a way, like that's the change I'm making. Whereas as a chef, I'd be taking people from like zero to a positive experience and creativity. And that, I don't think I could ever cover that gap. But I suppose as an entrepreneur now, I have the ability to.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I love hearing what other people would do if they weren't. So that's awesome. Okay, last question, which is really around your business.
I love these questions.
The current state of your business. I know that you do coaching, and if you have met me twice, what would be one piece of advice you would give me as a business coach?
Okay.
Career coach, and then what the next 6 months looks like for you in business world.
Interesting. Yeah. So I think knowing where StatDoctor is, knowing your energy, and you're putting your time in the right sort of things. What I'm currently obsessed with is this book. I don't know if you can see it. It's called this book here, Beyond Entrepreneurship by Jim Collins.
I'll have to read.
Yeah, it's probably the version 2.0. It's fantastic as an audiobook. The authors read out the new sections. But to me, it's probably the closest thing to like a Bible of entrepreneurship, I guess.
Wow.
I haven't even fully finished reading it, but it is absolutely impressive. I think it is what will take you from being a founder to becoming a CEO.
Okay.
As your business scales, and it's covered all of the elements that you really need to think about. So that would be my top recommendation. Yeah.
Amazing. Okay. I'm definitely going to read that.
That's great. Go for it. And what next 6 months look like for me is interesting. So at the beginning of this year, I joined a lovely writing group, posting on social media, copyright group.
Okay.
With Adi Kumar and Pranav Gadria. I don't know if you know those guys. Adi Kumar, the neurosurgeon.
No.
Anyway, like they invited me on this group, and like a couple of other clinicians who were posting on social media, and they're like, what do you want to achieve this year? I was like, oh, really good goal setting exercise. And I said, I want to help 6 people make medicine the side hustle in 2025.
I love them.
Yeah, and I am currently 5 down, 1 more to go, and off the 5, 1 is a group cohort. So I feel like I'm really happy with where things are.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay.
So in the next 6 months, I guess if there's 1 more person who's really keen to make medicine their side hustle and become a founder, yeah, I'm here for them. And I've also got my hands into a lot of stuff that Clinician is doing. I can share a link to that as well. So basically, Malapa, who's become a really dear friend, is a plastic surgeon, and working together, we found his non-clinical edge and where his zone of impact really is in the world. And we're building and growing the Clinician group, which has got many facets under it, and is really gonna make a big difference. And again, is a clinician-led company. and we're tackling private healthcare, we're tackling digital solutions, pharma,
Wow.
lifestyle medicine. So a couple of things in there. Um, you're asking me, do I get sucked into other clinician founders' ideas? Massively sucked in. He's a brilliant visionary, and like the idea was too good to say no to. So I've been sucked in, and we're doing some really good stuff there. So I think that's hugely on the cards for the next 6 months as well.
Amazing. Love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you sound a lot like me in that I do a bit of mentorship through some of the not for profit work I do. And I get so sucked into these amazing clinicians and the problems they're solving and wanting to get right behind them as best I can. So that's great to see you're doing the same.
Yeah, it's a fantastic time. This has been such a good conversation. I cannot believe it's been about an hour already. For all of those that joined us live, and I know a lot of people find this time a bit odd, but I also know that a lot of people listen to this podcast on LinkedIn about a few days after. So hopefully you've enjoyed this. If you've got any questions for Anu and I, please feel free to put them down in the comments. But I think as far as the recording goes, I'm going to say that's a wrap for today. Huge thanks to Anu Gangupati for the candor and the playbook behind StatDoctor, and the amazing and fantastic conversation we've had today. If this helped you think bigger about what you can build, follow or subscribe and share this episode with another clinician who needs to hear it. The next live episode on LinkedIn and YouTube will be on the 26th of August at the same time, 11:45 a.m. British Summer Time. We'll be having Dr. Suhail Hussain, who's a private London GP, and we're going to dig into building a boutique practice, positioning, pricing, patient experience, and sustainable growth. Again, a massive thanks to Dr. Akash Vijayan for the intro music to this podcast. Check out his work on your favorite music platform like Spotify or anywhere else. Until then, keep building, stay bold, and remember, you have the power to create something extraordinary. See you soon. So I
Cheers.
don't have any questions coming up, and I think with that, I might just hit the stop button, but stay on so that we can upload the recordings.
Of course.